I think we could all agree 2023 has been a pretty crazy year. There have been a lot of new emerging technologies and major shifts in the tech job market. So I thought in this video, it might be helpful for the people that are just getting into coding and are interested in becoming web developers if I did a web developer roadmap. So yeah, in this video, I'm going to give you a step-by-step guide to go from zero programming experience to becoming a web developer in 2024. And if you enjoyed the video, please subscribe and leave a like. This is a brand new channel and we're trying to grow here, guys. All right, so you want to become a web developer, but where do you start? Well, the first thing you're going to want to start with is a foundation, or all of the fundamental things that you need to know to become a web developer. There are 3 different things that you absolutely must know as a foundation to become a web developer. These 3 things are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. HTML is going to be the skeleton of your website. Learning HTML will allow you to add text and images and buttons and links. So just by learning HTML, you could technically build a website that looks really ugly and doesn't really do anything. If you want to add styles to your website, that's where CSS comes in. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Learning CSS will allow you to add colors and font styles and animations. And most importantly, you'll learn responsiveness, which allows you to make your website look good on all different kinds of screen sizes, since there's so many devices out there. And then finally, you'll need to learn JavaScript, which is an actual programming language. Learning JavaScript will allow you to learn how to actually code while adding functionality to your website so that it can actually do things. Like if you want something to actually happen when a button is clicked. HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are your foundation. And if you can understand these 3 things, that's enough already to call yourself a web developer, since you can develop for the web now. I'd recommend once you learn these 3 things that you create your first portfolio website and you deploy it to the web before moving on. Now, you may be able to create websites, but this doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get hired at some big company now as a web developer. Nowadays, a lot of web developers aren't just working on websites, they're working on full-blown web applications. There's a big difference between a static website that is sitting on the web that you just look at and a website with users and services and tons of data. So at some point, you're going to have to expand your knowledge a little bit more to be competitive with other web developers. The next thing that's important to focus on is the front end. Now, there are a bunch of different JavaScript frameworks you could choose to learn, but some of the most popular ones right now are React.js and Vue.js. I'd personally recommend learning React. And there are a whole bunch of others, so I recommend doing some research before you choose one. We use front-end JavaScript frameworks because it helps speed up the development process and it helps the performance of our websites and applications. Learning a JavaScript framework will help you learn how we make our sites more dynamic, and it'll help you understand the JavaScript ecosystem better. You'll also pick up how easy it is for us to install and use different packages and libraries instead of coding all of these things from scratch. And you can even try writing out some tests. Once you've learned a JavaScript framework, then you're getting pretty up to date with front-end web development. However, for these complex web applications that are hooked up to APIs and databases, we're also going to need to understand backend coding. And at this point in your web development journey, I would recommend learning client-server architecture and understanding how a front end communicates with a backend before moving on to learning backend programming, because it might be kind of confusing. Understanding client-server architecture is essential in web development, and it's really going to help you give perspective and understand how everything works. Just a quick explanation. The client is the front end of a website. And when you sign up on a website, those details don't just magically go into a database. When I hit submit to create a new user, those details have to get sent from the client or the front end to the back end, or the server, in other words. And this is where we have to learn backend coding, because the backend will be an entirely separate project that is going to receive those details somehow, and then it will store those details in a database because it will be hooked up to a database. Now, when it comes to backend coding or server-side coding, you can actually choose from a bunch of different programming languages. Some of the popular backend coding languages people learn are JavaScript, Python, Golang, and Rust. You could pretty much write backend code in your programming language of choice. So if you like Python, you could write a Python backend. If you like Java, you could write a Java backend. And you might want to pick the backend coding language you learn based on the job market and what jobs are available or what's popular at the time. In my opinion, if you're starting from scratch and you already learned JavaScript for the front end side of things, you might as well stick with it on the back end. So for JavaScript on the back end, you're going to want to learn Node.js and Express. And yes, this is still just JavaScript. It's going to be the same as the front end. It's just a back end framework. You'll need to learn how to code a REST API, and this will likely be how you're communicating with your front end. And you'll also need to learn how to connect your back-end code to a database, because a lot of web applications are going to involve data. So once you've learned the foundation material, and you learn client-server architecture, and you learn front-end frameworks, and you learn how to make a back-end, you can now build some pretty powerful things. And this is where I'd recommend that you just start building and you just start coding. It's hard to list every single thing that you need to know to become a successful web developer, but as you build more web applications, you'll pick up on all of these smaller details and intricacies that you will need to know to get hired. If you're aiming to get a job as a web developer, you also will probably need to pick up how to use cloud technologies like Google Cloud Services or Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure. This might sound a little bit intimidating, but it's not. It's just platforms for Google and Amazon and Microsoft for you to deploy your applications. These companies are huge and they have all of the servers that we need to deploy our projects and code to. But it's not too difficult, and luckily they all have pretty good documentation and tutorial videos for how to do this and how to learn this stuff. Another thing you'll have to pick up is how to use the command line and how to use Git. Git is basically a memory card for your code where you could save changes over time so that you don't lose your progress as you develop your applications. And a command line is going to be how you navigate your project, how you navigate your computer, and how you navigate other systems. This is basically all of the material that you would learn when you go into a boot camp, and they would have you build projects along the way. And once you understand all of this stuff and you build a bunch of web apps and projects and deploy them to the web, then you should be comfortable enough to start applying for web developer positions. Now, to stand out as an applicant, you might want to pick up some specialized skills or extra skills that people don't have to put on your resume. You should look at emerging technologies like ChatGPT or low-code, no-code platforms. And when you look at these new emerging technologies, you'll actually notice there's a lot of opportunities in this space. ChatGPT has brought the rise of the prompt engineering position, while no-code platforms like Wix Studio make it incredibly easy to build and scale websites. And you should even work on soft skills like problem solving and communication. Now, I know it sounds like a lot, and it could be intimidating for some people, but a lot of people can learn all of this stuff pretty quickly with determination. There's a lot of great resources out there, including YouTube and interactive online courses that can help you kind of blow through this stuff if you're consistent and learn on a day-to-day basis. The best strategy, in my opinion, is to just keep coding as you learn and build real things. So start with a portfolio website, and then as you build web apps, start putting them on your portfolio so you could track your progress. All in all, if you learn all of these things, you're going to be a web developer and you're going to be up there with all of the modern technologies.